Hey guys, thank you for joining us this week. Hopefully everyone's doing well, getting excited for the upcoming SharePoint conference. You're just stuck with me and Tom today. Jen is busy at work, so you get our beautiful faces. We'll be going through and talking about a whole bunch of updates, and there's a lot of them for us to talk about today. As normal, we're going to be breaking stuff down into rolling out, in development, and launched, and our launch list is ginormous. Surprisingly, too, we actually have some canceled stuff, too, I think Tom and I will talk about related to SharePoint and Power Apps. But we'll probably just kind of dive into it. There is a ton of stuff in the updates. You can go through and check out the roadmap yourself. But Tom made a good joke coming in today that clearly there's some sort of major conference coming up that maybe they're trying to get a lot of stuff launched for.
Yeah, I need to start doing some Google searching on that, I think, because there's just a whole lot of SharePoint stuff that seems to have attention.
If only someone had a discount code that they could, talk about, considering they're the only person with a discount code on this podcast right now.
Yeah. Actually, though, my partner, Tamara, has joined or has filled out her registration for the conference and did use my thing, so
nice.
I'm good to go. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter for me because I can't get paid the hotel and the airfare due to our ethics rules at work, so it's like I'm getting the conference for free. It doesn't matter whether you use my code
name
or
on
not.
the conference code, even though I'm not presenting and likely won't even necessarily be there. Just be like, Adam Oakes, he sent you, will be good.
Sounds good.
I think we'll go ahead and get into it. You want to go ahead and start us off, Tom? I know
Sure.
There's a ton of SharePoint stuff this week.
Yeah, so I'm going to scroll through a lot of these. I'll probably combine a few as we go because some of them are like individual entries for specific items that are all grouped together. But we'll just keep going. Adam will take the admin-y stuff. I'll take the SharePoint-y stuff, and we'll go from there. So
something new that we don't normally do, right?
Wow, let's mix it up here, Adam. So custom page designs are rolling out in SharePoint Pages, and I know we've talked about this briefly in the past, but what this allows you to do is take a page that's out there that you've built out and then turn it into a template, which you can then make as a page that you can roll out to other sites. Great idea, especially with us starting our migration right now, where they're like, we'd like to have custom sites. I'm like, no, you're getting out of the box, but this may be a nice intermediate solution for them to get to what they want. File restores for SharePoint and Microsoft Teams is also in a rolled out state now. That's where you can go through and restore files from any point in time during the last 30 days. So if you think you've had a corrupted file somewhere, you can go back and get it, and you're able to do that yourself.
Yeah,
So
I love that this
cool.
is end-user focused. They've always had like the recycling bin when you're going through and looking at something like OneDrive, but even though it's a recycling bin that's been around since like Windows 3.1, like a lot of people still didn't necessarily know how to get to it. I love that they're going to have this actual option and feature and something you can kind of train your end users on, because let's be honest, for those of us who have to do the administrative side, anything that can reduce the number of tickets and put something self-service out there is great, and also love to see they're specifically designing this for Teams and SharePoint as well.
Well, and I think what's cool, too, is it's not, at least the way it reads, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily just files that have been deleted. It's like you got a file out there, but you think it's been compromised at some point. I need to go back and find the version that's not compromised to make that work. So good steps there.
Yeah, there was one thing that I thought was really cool. This might be slightly ahead of one of yours. We'll just kind of see when I throw it out there.
Okay.
I can see this being awesome specifically for how I typically work with clients rolling out new things. So what they announced is basically rolling out, and they're saying it's May of this year, so hopefully we'll have it soon or now. It's what they're calling brown bag style events for Office 365 groups in Outlook. And the concept here is you have a group, the group has 50 people in it. The thing that makes these unique from a normal calendar invite that you'd create for a group is if you were to just go into the group and create a calendar invite, you'd either have the option turned on that every message would email the users, so then they would get an email about it, or no one would see it because it was just in the calendar. The cool thing with the brown bags is there's a special field that you can go in for required users. So you can go in there and say, these people need to be there, and then it gives the options for everyone else in the group to see it, be aware of it, and opt in to join. So I really see these as really cool from the idea of like trainings. So say I'm going out and I'm rolling out Teams, or I'm rolling out SharePoint, or I'm rolling out Delve or some sort of new feature to people. if they have a group that's already created, this, hey, this is the finance group, you could go in and create a brown bag style event, require the leaders, the people to be there, and then advertise it to the people in the group. Hey guys, we've added some training sessions that we would love for you to attend. They're on the calendar. You can check them out, sign up for the one you want to go to, and then you built in have a record of who's been there, stuff like that. So from a training standpoint, and I'm sure there's other applications, other groups, but for me, I can see myself actually using this in a really, really direct way. I thought it was really, really cool and a really cool concept.
Yeah, that one is on here somewhere, and we'll point it out when we get there. So we have the file restores. We have Outlook on the web. They have a new task experience where you'll have a different look and feel for the task panel on the Outlook for the web, and it's going to do integration with Microsoft To Do. So that's really cool. And then there's also planner task assignment notifications. So if you're on a planner in Teams and somebody assigns you a task, you're going to get that notification, which is really, and it's going to be the notification in the activities feed, not just the notification that you get in email. So that's kind of pushing more and more into the, hey, use Teams for everything type thing. So that I like. Outlook on the web, schedule a meeting as an option in suggested replies. So they've been doing a lot more with probably taking a page from Google where, Google wants to give you, hey, I'll give you an answer here that may be your full response. Microsoft's starting to do the same thing, and one of the suggested replies that they're going to be rolling out now is to suggest to set up a meeting, which I think is really interesting. So if for some reason it looks at what you've got there and you go to reply and it looks like something that's probably better suited as a meeting, that's what's going to be one of your suggested responses, and you can build that out much more quickly and go with it from there. So I think that's cool. Yeah, the next one up there, that's your groups in Outlook self-service events rolling out. Go for it.
Well, yeah, no, just talking about that as a whole, we've obviously already kind of talked about it. The next thing I have is quite a bit down on the admin center. Is there anything else from the SharePoint side or team side you want to hit in the next couple ones?
Just keep going, because all of this stuff for... Actually, I'm done with rolling out, so yeah, you can do whatever you want now.
Really quickly, they're basically announced they're rolling out a new Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So this is different from just the Office 365 Admin Center. It all gets confusing with how Microsoft labels stuff. But if you have a centralized place that you can manage all things Microsoft 365, so Intune, Windows 10 Enterprise, all that stuff, basically there's a new experience you probably noticed if you're familiar with that. Started in April. They basically said they're still rolling it out to everyone. It will eventually become the default, and talked a little bit about some of the areas they're improving it. I just love to see anytime they're working on their UIs. For the most part, I think as stuff evolves and as new features comes out, there's always ways they can go in and theoretically improve the experience. I love what they've done with the Protection Center and the Security and Compliance Center. So anytime I see them continuing to work on it, I think it's definitely a good thing.
Nice.
We talked a little bit about this one too, going through, I think last week we talked about it when they announced it, but they're actually rolling out what they're calling the Mail Flow Insights. This is their Phase 2 section of it. If you guys remember when we talked about it, this is insights into how the traffic is working through the email for your organization. So if you see messages that are being rejected by different users, if you see problems with delivery, if you see certain users getting hit with certain things over and over again, it's basically an admin level view of some pretty nifty metrics and tools and information that you can see. And I see this as really them taking a step forward to really make the same type of experience you get maybe with something like Barracuda or some of the more robust front-end endpoints that are going to sit in front of mail systems. This is really them stepping up their game to provide some of those enterprise-level tools and resources to make your job easier, where you don't have to be an Exchange expert or you don't have to be a mail delivery expert to know exactly what's going on. You get these tools that have been developed by people like that give you insights to what's going on with your organization, which love to see that type of stuff happening.
Very nice. So are you done with the rolling outs? Okay, well, let's go to the in development, which means that they're working hard on it, and we don't know when they'll show up, but hopefully it'll be soon, and hopefully we'll never make it to cancel. So we've got, there's a couple Microsoft, well, there's one Microsoft Teams one, location-based routing. So that's call-related. I don't do much with Teams and calls, but hey, great, love it. Go for it.
It's basically, if you have specific PSTN endpoints or specific VoIP endpoints, you can dictate certain calls can or can't route there. So if you're using full, PBX cloud-based routing, you can basically go through and say, okay, well, like, I want these calls to only go to these people or to this group because they're in the service industry, or these people are, required by law to support people from the UK, so I therefore want it to route through there. It's basically just giving you more administrative level controls to route incoming calls based on the location of the incoming calls to where you want to do it.
Okay, very cool. On the SharePoint side, they've got one that doesn't have a whole lot of detail in it, but I like where they're going with it, which is SharePoint lists from Excel. So in SharePoint 2010, we've always been able to go say, hey, create a custom list from this Excel file. And it does a relatively good job. Not all the field types are proper, but it's close enough. And you've been able to make a template of an existing list and pull it over. But now they're also allowing you to make a list from another list, which I'm assuming that also means pulling over data. Yes. Wow, Inception here. But I like the idea that there are ways to say, hey, I see something that I like over here, and I want to make a clone of it over there.
Sure.
And not having to call in IT or have some sort of special magic wand that you wave to make that happen. So I'm encouraged to see where that ends up going.
Yeah, there's actually one thing, too, that I thought was really cool that, honestly, I didn't even really think of how nice of a feature this would be until I saw it listed on the in development. So Microsoft's done a wonderful job from an identity standpoint with authentication. When I first started getting heavily into 365 3 years or so ago, if you really wanted to do your identity properly and securely, you were going the full ADFS route. You were doing your own, you're controlling the login servers. Specifically, if you're really wanting the single sign-on experience, that's what you're doing. Well, in the last year and a half or so, Microsoft came out with what they call pass-through authentication, where you're going through and you have cloud-based authentication that can actually give you proper single sign-on experience of what your users want to see. So you no longer had to commit and put in the infrastructure behind fully running a properly up ADFS system. Because if you really want to get to the architectural side, if you're properly doing an ADFS 3.0 system, you're having 5 servers wherever you're going through and running it because you need your WAFs, you need your ADFS login servers, you need your domain controllers, all that stuff, and then you have to have redundancy, so have that built somewhere else. And then realistically, if you're doing it right, you also want geographical redundancy. So I've literally had clients before that to put up an ADFS system, you're talking about adding 20-plus servers into a system, and what are the cost of that? So it's obviously more viable long-term if you're comfortable in what you're really looking for as SSO to go through pass-through authentication. What they've actually announced is a stage rollout to allow you to go, if you're currently in a managed federated system, which is what it would be if you're doing, ADFS, to go from that into a cloud Azure AD-based authentication, but do it in stages. So it's no longer you have to commit and flip the switch and everyone move over all at once and suddenly there's a new login system and you have one of those D-Day moments where you're coming in on the IT app, you wake up in the morning, you're just kind of like, when's my phone going to blow up? When's my phone going to blow up? So the ability that you can go through and do this gradually, I think, is really cool. And honestly, I think this is a much more viable path that a lot of larger companies are going to start looking at, fully embracing the cloud from an identity authentication standpoint, now that they can get SSO actually in the cloud. So once I read that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's actually really, really cool.
Very nice. So there is, before we get to my next SharePoint thing, there's a lot of Intune things. You just want to kind of run over those high level?
Yeah, so I won't discuss every single one of them. I think there's 8 or 9 different Intune stuff that's now in development. If Intune's your thing and you really want to know some of the new stuff going out, you can go and check out the roadmap, get a full list of the new things happening. I do want to highlight a couple ones that I thought was really, really cool, or that I thought, hey, that's really, really nice. One that's big for me, if you have fully managed devices through Intune, so this is typically corporate-owned devices and mobile devices that you want to go through and fully manage everything on it top to bottom, manage all the applications, such as calls, messaging, all that stuff. Up until now, you basically had to do that on Apple devices. You couldn't really do that on Androids. They're basically working to have enterprise features on fully managed Android devices. So if you're a larger organization and you have Android, Google-based mobile devices, they're now really going to be, hopefully soon, they say by Q4 of this year, coming into step with the user experience that you have with Apple devices. I know a lot of people that aren't Apple fanboys are going to be really happy to see that, because up until now, you basically had to commit and go to Apple products if you really wanted to go through and see what it could do. The other two ones that really stood out to me that I thought was really cool, they're actually doing some additional BitLocker management capabilities. So BitLocker is something you typically see if you're managing Windows devices and Windows 10 policies through Intune. And obviously BitLocker does device encryption on your hard drives and your storage disk and stuff. They're basically adding more robust, more enterprise-based features around that. Stuff like, key rotation, new management policies, silent disk encryption, key recovery of both admin level and end user like we heard before. Anytime I'm seeing stuff like this, it gets a big smile on my face, because this is them stepping up their game to bring stuff that is either not out there for other providers when you're looking at the full MDM solutions, or bringing stuff to true enterprise level of control. So that is the type of updates that you're seeing throughout Intune. They're doing stuff with new threat protection. They're doing stuff with firewalls, with Windows Defender. They're doing stuff about credentials. They're doing stuff around S/MIME encryption. Whole bunch of updates going out through there so you to be aware of, but all of them are in the line of they're really stepping up their game. One of the things specifically that really stood out to me, so a lot of the customers that I deal with nowadays in my new job are really concerned with meeting certain federal standards. There's one that jumps out that everyone talks about, and that's NIST 800-171 or NIST 800-157. They're guidelines that are required of what you do. Oftentimes if you're doing government level work, so if you're working with someone in the federal government, you have to meet these certain standards. And so, for instance, some of the updates that they're doing around derived credentials are to bring Intune up in standard to be able to meet that. You're seeing this in line as Intune is now going live, and what you're seeing in the government and GCC high domains and tenants, you're now seeing these features being brought and being developed to really make it more competitive in that field, which is just awesome to see.
You are such a geek.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sitting there listening to you going, I don't have a clue as to what he's talking about for half of this stuff, but he's happy. That is awesome.
It's good things.
So going back into the Teams and the Microsoft or the SharePoint realm here, where I can actually understand what's happening. So in Microsoft Teams, they are making some changes in shared links, which I think is really interesting. So when you go to share a link in Teams, it's now allowing you to share the link and change the permissions or set the permissions at the time you send it. So it's nice in the fact that you don't have to go out and do all the changes over on the OneDrive side or the SharePoint side to make it shareable and then go into Teams and share the link. You can do it all in one step. So I think that's really cool in terms of being able to get the sharing going on and make it easier for people to feel comfortable sharing links rather than making attachments and forwarding attachments around to 50 million people. One other thing that they have coming up in Teams that's listed here is you can add up to 100 people in a group chat. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure I ever want to be in a chat with 100 people.
That's what I was thinking.
But, you can do it. Doesn't mean you should, but you can. It's like the 5,000 people in a Microsoft or in a Teams workspace. I'm like, I better never be invited to a Teams workspace that's got 5,000 people in it. That's just all there is to it.
There was a couple Teams things that I thought were cool. They're small things, but they're things that are coming out either this month or next that I thought was small things that they're doing, but really, really cool. Share system audio in Teams meeting. What this is really meant for, have you guys ever been doing a presentation and had like a video or audio clip you wanted to play? It's not that uncommon. If I'm doing a training, I'll plug in one of those quick 2-3 minute Microsoft, hey, we love this product videos, like, this is why Teams is great. And it shows happy, diverse people, yeah. But those sometimes give a good high-level overview. So rather than me trying to do that, I'll just play a clip. Well, if you're ever doing a remote meeting before, you'd have to be like, hey, can someone open up this meeting on there? Because you can now plug in system audio, if I play it, I can make the sound from the video go through my meeting and project to the attendees.
Nice.
Really, really cool. The other thing that I thought this was silly but funny, they've added hold music if you have people on hold, which is just Oh, that's cool.
I'm going to call myself and put myself on hold because my Alexa is not working today, Cool stuff. Couple things in the SharePoint realm and then one more to round out the in-development stuff. So moving SharePoint sites to a new location is in development. Jen alluded to this 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, before it was listed, which is cool.
Yeah. And
She's
basically,
like
yes, she is. It's wonderful to have somebody in the know. So it says this feature will allow administrators, or administrations, probably should be administrators, to move a site to a location of an existing site.
Give Tom just a second. His Skype decided he didn't want to be here, but he'll be back in probably about 10 seconds if this is anything. But it will basically allow administrators to move a site of an existing location to a new site. So you can basically say, okay, this site exists here. I want to now go through and move it to a new location. So say you have a modern site, and you want to move that modern site to become a root site for your actual tenant or your domain, we have the option to go through and do that, which is pretty cool and pretty straightforward to allow you to move it over. Another thing that was really, really cool that I'm sure Tom would talk about, or probably would talk about when he comes back, they're actually continuing to develop some really cool stuff around the SharePoint migration tool. Specifically, there's what they're calling site migration support. So right now, the SharePoint migration tool will let you move file shares, will let you move legacy SharePoint content up to SharePoint Online. And that's a pretty cool, pretty easy way to do it, but it's not necessarily the easiest to use. The new update to the tool is going to actually allow you to move a complete site as is. So say you have a SharePoint Server 2013, you can go through and say, all right, I want to move this whole site and actually move it through. And the cool thing, too, is this is going to retroactively reach back into legacy versions of SharePoint. So say, okay, I have SharePoint Server 2010 and I want to move a site up, you'll have the options to do that. Tom, I was just kind of mentioning, what are your thoughts on the SharePoint site or SharePoint migration tools site move options going to allow you to move sites to both modern SharePoint and the legacy SharePoint systems as well? Audio's not working yet, Tom. You're probably...
Thank you. There I go. Thank you. I find this is something that's going to be really cool because you'll have people who say, and this is kind of also tied into kind of what we're doing on our migration too, we're having to come up with URL names of what we think a site should be. And we've got like 2,400 of these things that we have to do by the end of the year. So
nice small task.
Yeah, nice small task. 50, 60 hours a week, yeah, no problem. I could do this. But the thing is, I may come up with a naming convention that has a bunch of seemingly random letters at the front of the name. So it may be knowledge management, but the reality is we have like 10 knowledge management sites in SharePoint 2010, but one's here, one's there, one's over here under this subsite. So I'm coming up with URLs that may be HR, for human resources, CS, customer service, knowledge management. Well, I know at some point they're going to go, we really don't like that URL. Can we change it? And really my only choice at this point would be, well, let's go out and use ShareGate or something and migrate the thing to another site. This being able to change the URL. Oh, God, yeah. I mean, this is going to be no different than saying, well, just change the name. You really don't care about the URL. No, we really want the URL to be fixed. Fine, do it. I don't care now. Go for it. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I was also talking to the idea with the SharePoint migration tool. I briefly mentioned that before you got back online. But pretty cool some of the stuff they're doing where it's basically going to allow you to move full sites with the SharePoint migration tool itself. So rather than going in and saying, I want this content, I want this file, it's going to be, okay, everything that sits under this umbrella I want to move to both, newer systems, but also they announced that they're going to be doing it all the way back to SharePoint 2010. So some of the organizations that are out there that, need to upgrade and haven't. This is, really Microsoft making an effort to develop their free tools that allow you to go in and really kind of utilize that in a way that's, competitive and easy to do.
Yeah, and depending on how much stuff you have going on and how much customization you have, this tool may well be good enough to get you where you need to be instead of going out and buying ShareGate, which I will admit ShareGate is awesome.
Well, you're also paying thousands of dollars to get it, and that's the cheapest tool that you can get,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
heaven forbid you need Metalogix or something,
Oh, yeah. That's like six figures at that point, where ShareGate, I actually got in trouble with my boss, and like, it is really a no-brainer to buy this. And he's like, we're not letting you sit in on vendor negotiations for this one. Like, I'm sorry, but for like $6,000 a year, this thing is like cheap at twice the price.
Table.
Yeah, it's just like, I need this. So I'm glad to see that they're doing a little bit more there. And then one other thing which I think is really important on the team side, and that is you can now make announcements in the posts or in your channels, and you can have an announcement type post, gives you the chance to put a headline, gives you the chance to put a background out there. I know some people are going to abuse that horribly, but the thing is, it will make it different than just another post out there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's awesome. I can really see this. So when I used to work at Rackspace, we used Slack. And there's good things about Slack and bad things about Slack, but literally, we had people who would call in for Office 365 or hosted Exchange support, and we'd have 100 techs working, and they needed a chat room that they could go through and communicate. But I'm sure you can imagine when you have 100 people aged 20 to 40, that chat room was a little messy. Had a whole bunch of junk in there. One of the things that I really liked was being able to go and ignore stuff, and I felt like when Teams first came out and the chat room function, it didn't give me enough administrative control to really be able to cut through the crap that I basically didn't want to see. I see this as huge for organizations like that. If Rackspace was using Teams and say there's an outage going on or they identified an issue, rather than just having to, bold it and hope everyone see it, they actually have a way to differentiate the message and get it across. Really, really cool.
Yeah, we ended up getting our Enterprise Service Center to go to Teams. So instead of using persistent chat, they now use the chat in their Teams workspace. And I think to have these announcement things pop up will make some of the things they're trying to communicate out to whoever follows that point chat. I think it'll make it much more visible, and you'll get better response there.
Yeah. So you want to maybe take a slight pivot and talk about the canceled stuff first before we go into launched. Launched is a huge list, and I think you and I are probably going to rapid fire that one as we go through. But there's some pretty interesting things in canceled. So I want to, maybe we'll take a moment and kind of look at that. All of it exists in the overall realm of SharePoint coexisting with Power Apps or other applications. So it's kind of going to be your wheelhouse. So I'll kind of set you up something, get your thoughts on it. The ones that kind of surprised me, there's 4 different ones all related to Power Apps. I don't know if this is necessarily a sign that they're going away from Power Apps or maybe to some of the customizations that they have there. Maybe people weren't using Power Apps in SharePoint as much as they wanted, but they've canceled the ability to support rich text fields in Power App once it's in SharePoint, responsive design in Canvas-based Power Apps, camera and image controls integrated into Power Apps from SharePoint, and then finally the Power Apps and Flow provisioning is part of SharePoint design, so you don't have that automated provisioning process and the packaging of a SharePoint site when you're building it out. Any thoughts on that from the Power Apps perspective and how it integrates with SharePoint?
I will preface anything I say by we're just trying to keep our heads above ground with the migration, and I still love my SharePoint Designer and my info path. So I'm not exactly completely and fully up to Power Apps, even though I am taking a Power Apps in a day next week. But
I will say, I don't think any of this is core functionality to Power Apps.
No, but when I'm looking at Power Apps as being the alternative, I'll use the right word there, to InfoPath, not having support for rich text fields from SharePoint, I'm like, okay, that's kind of critical. The responsive design, that doesn't fire me up as much, but it's still kind of interesting. The custom forms image support, that really sounded like a cool thing. And support for adding Power Apps and Flow provisioning as part of SharePoint site designs. Again, are you cutting off the future of where you want people to go? Maybe we'll hear more about this in Vegas in a couple weeks. But
yeah, and I imagine there's a chance for that, right? Like when I go through and I look at these, to me, when you look at how you license and how you consume Power Apps, publishing it to a SharePoint site was a cool thing that you could do, and it made it more accessible, but that was never necessarily the core functionality of why Power Apps were built. So when I read through these, I saw it as they probably have some different vision plan where they're going to be either solving this in another way or having integrations in another way, and this just didn't make the cut for the future of how they see those products integrated in together.
Yeah, and it could be too, and again, I have no basis for this whatsoever and may be completely off base, but being that they really have Power Apps and Flow as entities that use all the different pieces of SharePoint or of Office 365 and other non-Microsoft things, they may be trying to cater less to SharePoint and make SharePoint just one more endpoint. And so instead of trying to build real tight integration that might destroy other parts of integration, maybe they're going to more of a lower common denominator type thing. I don't know, but I was a little surprised with that because I would have thought they would have been enhancing that, not canceling things.
Yeah, and like you said, I bet you this is just a preview of we don't have the full picture and we'll find out in Vegas, would be my assumption. The other one really kind of surprised me. I don't know how much you've worked with Power BI, but they basically canceled the ability to create Power BI reports from Excel in SharePoint or OneDrive, because it actually extends to OneDrive as well, too. That was originally slated to not come out until next year, but you still have the ability to create Power BI reports off of Excel files, just not Excel files stored in their cloud-based storage. I honestly don't really get this one. To me, maybe they had problems getting the technology working with as the Excel spreadsheets would update, Power BI needed to theoretically look at that, but that's kind of core Power BI functionality. I'm really interested to get people like Jason or John White's perspective on this, some of the people that, Trev got, some of the people that are really heavy Power BI users.
Right.
Is there a technical reason this is coming from? Because when I saw this here, this was one that kind of caused my eyebrows to raise.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that these things are not being canceled because of licensing things that they want to do, because I've always thought the licensing for Flow and Power Apps is just a little squirrely and kind of hard to understand in the fact that I can have an E5, but yet I may still need to have a P1 and a P2, and I'm not sure how that works. And if I have a P2 Power Apps, that's like $40 per person per month. Good luck on that. I'm not sure where that goes and how they get there, and I hope they're not doing more restrictive licensing on this stuff, because those are the kind of things that we're going to be building on a day-to-day basis for our SharePoint sites.
Sure, yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it's one of the things, don't get me wrong, we all understand they're investing a lot of money, a lot of personnel, a lot of manpower. They need these things to make money. But like you said, you always worry that they make it so restrictive to entry it's going to squash the creativity side of it to begin with. So yeah, we'll just have to see where it goes. So now we'll move into launch. This is stuff that has actually gone launch. This list is huge, guys. Some of it we've talked about before, some of it we've not. We'll probably go rapid fire through a lot of this stuff and just talk about some of the stuff that stood out to us. But literally there's like 50 things. So like we'll probably mention some of our highlights. You want to go ahead and get us kicked off, Tom?
Sure, and I'm going to try to stick with things that we haven't talked about or haven't told you that it's imminent or anything like that. Good luck trying to figure that out with all the ones I have highlighted. They do have one called Microsoft and Teams Folder in Site Visibly Connected to Channel. Now it's easy to tell which folders within your library have an associated Teams channel and chat associated to it within the SharePoint user interface. I think that's really cool because it's one of those ones where they're not going to go in and delete a folder thinking, I don't need this folder that says general, and they find out that they just blew their general chat away. So, yeah, give me some feedback there.
Yeah, anything too. I think a lot of organizations are starting to now grow and build out their Teams functionality, and I always felt like, well, they've done better. They've now developed SharePoint sites to be viewable in Teams, but the file experience, even though technically the files in Teams were in SharePoint, the UI experience was always kind of different. So the fact that they're now starting to do some of the stuff to identify it, I think is great.
Yeah. I'm scrolling through here real quick. Everything else that I'm seeing here, hey, the icons have updated. Yeah, that happened a long time ago. A lot of the things about SharePoint headers and footers and the change the look panels, It looks like all the things that they were doing along those lines are now in a fully launched stage, so you should be seeing all of those. The Microsoft Teams is going to be automatically rolled out as part of Office 365 Pro Plus. That's now fully done. Microsoft Forms Pro Preview, which we thought was already available, apparently is now launched. So it's fully available now. The feedback button's supposed to be gone on your pages in SharePoint Online. I'm just not seeing a whole lot of new stuff that we have not talked about in the past, that they've snuck in on us here.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the stuff that's, launched, we think there were small updates coming through and getting in preparation. Tom and I were talking before we got on started recording. They're all just gearing up for the SharePoint conference. I imagine some of the stuff might potentially be highlighted there, or new features coming out and say, hey, are you now available that you can do this? Because, not everyone like you guys watching or us going through and coming through this are aware of every single thing that's coming out every single time. Besides that, for the most part, I kind of agree with Tom. A lot of stuff that we've kind of had our eye on that we think is good. One of the things that I'm not sure we specifically talked about that's apparently been launched for a couple months now, the idea of the mass delete notification. So this was always an alert that came out to Office 365 admins. So if you had Azure AD Premium 1, it would tell you, hey, Joe has gone through and deleted 8 terabytes of data. That's a lot. Which was, good. It allowed you, hey, that might not be normal. Maybe Joe's planning on quitting. Maybe Joe's an upset employer. Maybe Joe's hacked. But one of the things that they're actually doing is in SharePoint and OneDrive, they're now actually doing a person that's the owner, so whether it's their OneDrive or they're the site owner, they will actually get an email letting them know of site deletions or of content deletions when it's a large number of files and pointing them to where the recovery standpoint is. So say in the hypothetical case Tom was talking about earlier where someone deletes all the files under general or something like that, right, just nukes out all the team files. Now, instead of it necessarily being, hey, the admin gets an alert, they then need to go and act, they'll actually email the person who's the owner of those files, the owner of that team, as well as give them instructions on how they can go through and start that restore process, which, as we talked about at the start of this, bringing this nice and full circle, I am all for anything that takes menial, repetitive task over and over and over again away from IT admins. I think it makes you better IT admins. I think it makes your users stronger users. So not sure if we talked about that one, but I love the user or the owner notification part of that.
Yeah, I actually wrote a tip on that for my 1minuteofficemagic.com site last week or week before that.
Again, Tom?
1minuteofficemagic.com, Adam. Thank you for asking.
Oh, really? And you just show wonderful tips about what people can do in Office, right?
Things that basically you could look at and learn how to do in less than a minute.
So 1minuteofficetips.com?
1minuteofficemagic.com.
Officemagic.com. Okay, so just in case anyone missed it.
Yeah. 1minuteofficemagic.com.
Head on to fire directly to the forehead.
But yeah, the only thing to keep in mind on that whole mass deletion email is that the question comes into play, well, how many do you have to delete for it to be considered mass? And the question is, we don't know. And Microsoft basically says it's a best guess.
I see this as an oh shit fixer, right? Pardon my French.
Yeah.
I figured that someone did something they shouldn't have done, or you've been hacked. This is a way you can get it back.
Yeah. Deleting 50 documents may not trigger it. Deleting 500 probably would. And it could be a thing where me deleting 500 doesn't trigger it, but Adam deleting 250 may.
I'm not trusted nearly as much.
I wouldn't. But you don't know. But it's again a best attempt to keep people from shooting themselves in the foot, and you having to do emergency recoveries instead of finding out at the point that it actually occurred. So it is a cool feature. I like it, and letting more people know instead of just the person who did it, but also letting the site owner know so they can be responsible for their site. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so honestly, guys, this was a pretty long pulse this week. A lot of stuff coming out. That's probably trends we'll see moving up to SharePoint Conference. Normally, they'll still add stuff to roadmaps, but they maybe won't have a lot of announcements coming out. As we're gearing up for that, we'll still be doing the pulses every week as best as we can, and you can expect we'll probably have a giant SharePoint Conference recap the week after, because I'm sure there'll be bukus and bukus and bukus of stuff for all of us to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Jen and Tom will be giddy, and I'll just be sitting there smiling, letting them talk about SharePoint. It will be great. But ultimately, thank you for joining us on the Pulse this week, guys. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Hopefully you're excited. If you have the opportunity to come join us in Vegas, it's going to be a great time. Microsoft Conference is always a one-half party, one-half technical. Hey, here's new stuff coming out. So Tom and Jen are both speaking there. There's going to be tons of people from the community. It's always a good experience, and I mean, hey, it's Vegas. If you do want, both Tom and Jen have discount codes. They'll get you, a little bit of a discount on your registration. So you can, contact them on social media. I'm sure they're already posting them everywhere. You want to go ahead and, throw out your code real quick, Tom?
I think mine is Duff, DUFF, and I think hers is Mason.
So Duff like the Simpsons beer, pretty easy to remember.
Duff like the beer, Duff like the butt, whatever you want to go with it.
But seriously, guys, besides that, hopefully you guys have a great week. We look forward to SharePoint Conference. We'll see you guys all soon.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.